Every legendary band hits a moment when the world turns on them. Critics mock, labels hesitate. Even fans start to whisper, nah, they've lost it. These are 10 songs that shut the critics up in an instant. Tracks so good, they reminded everyone these bands were never just some ordinary garage acts. Number 10. London Calling, The Clash. By 1978, people were already declaring punk dead. The Clash were dismissed as angry kids with guitars. Too political, too messy, destined to burn out fast. So instead of shrinking, they made London Calling and threw everything they had into it. With wildcard producer Guy Stevens literally hurling chairs and climbing ladders in the studio to keep the energy up, the band exploded past straight punk into reggae, rockabilly, ska, and even hints of jazz and pop. London calling to the faraway towns, now war is declared. Released in December 1979, the title track sounded like the end of the world set to a beat. Joe Strummer shouted about nuclear fear, unemployment, police pressure, and rebellion, but with a clarity and poetry critics didn't expect from a punk band. The album hit the UK top 10 and over time crept onto almost every greatest albums list you can name. Live by the river, to the imitation soul. Rolling Stone would later crown it the best album of the 1980s because of its US release in early 1980, a technicality that says a lot about how huge its impact was. The Clash didn't just quiet their doubters, they converted them, turning a sneer about the only band that matters into a description that suddenly felt not that far from the truth. Number 9. Hotel California, Eagles. For years, the Eagles were the kings of smooth, polished country rock, soft harmonies, the soundtrack to long drives, and safe radio. Then Hotel California arrived and ripped the wallpaper down. Henley and Frey turned the California dream into a trap. Fame as a beautiful building you can't escape from. With Don Felder and Joe Walsh weaving that legendary twin guitar outro, the title track became a 6-minute journey from seduction to suffocation. On the dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair. When Henley sang, "You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave," it was a line that landed far beyond rock radio. Critics who had called them bland suddenly had to admit how dark and ambitious this was. The album sold tens of millions. The song won the Grammy for Record of the Year, and Hotel California turned into a metaphor people still use for addiction, excess, and the price of success. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. The Safe Band had written one of rock's most unsettling mirrors and invited everyone to stare into it. Welcome to the Hotel California. Number 8. Back in Black, AC/DC. In early 1980, when Bon Scott died, many assumed AC/DC were finished. To their critics, they'd always been too loud, too simple, too dependent on one wild frontman. Instead of giving in, they flew to the Bahamas with producer Mutt Lange and new singer Brian Johnson and made Back in Black. An album that sounded like a thunderbolt in morning clothes. The all-black cover was a nod to Scott. The music was pure refusal to die. Back in Black, Hell's Bells, You Shook Me All Night Long. One after another, the songs turned into permanent fixtures of rock radio, sports arenas, and bar jukeboxes. The record went on to sell over 50 million copies worldwide, placing it among the best-selling albums in history. There were no long explanations, no big reinventions, just the band doing what critics never understood in the first place, harder than ever. Instead of a eulogy, they delivered a resurrection and redefined what a comeback album could be. Number 7. Alive, Pearl Jam. When grunge hit, Pearl Jam were immediately thrown into the spotlight alongside Nirvana and Soundgarden, and some early coverage focused more on the hype than the music. Alive started life as an instrumental demo called Dollar Short, written by Stone Gossard from his pre-Pearl Jam days in Mother Love Bone. When Eddie Vedder got the tape, he wrote a set of lyrics based on a real emotional blow from Vedder's life, discovering as a teenager that the man he called his father wasn't his biological dad, and the swirl of anger, confusion, and survival that follows. Mike McCready's long, aching solo turned the back half of the track into pure catharsis. The kind of outro that feels more like an exorcism than a guitar showcase, openly inspired by Hendrix-style blues leads. Vedder didn't rush to explain or defend the band in glossy interviews. He let his voice crack on stage and on record, and fans picked up on how personal it was. The song grew from a debut rock single into an anthem people shouted as if their own lives were in the lyrics. Over time, even skeptical critics came to treat it as one of the core songs of the early 90s. Proof that Pearl Jam weren't a label invention, but a band willing to put real wounds on tape. Number 6, With or Without You, U2. By 1987, a lot of people still weren't convinced about U2. Some thought they were just another big message rock band that talked more than they delivered. Then With or Without You arrived, and the conversation changed. Built around a simple bass line Adam Clayton kept looping in the studio, the band stripped everything back and let the song lean on mood instead of volume. The Edge added those haunting swells using a new sustain effect that made the chords feel like they were hanging in mid-air. See the stone set in your eyes. See the and Bono kept his vocal low and cracked on purpose, more like a confession than a speech. It was vulnerable, not preachy, and that caught everyone off guard. The result? Their first #1 single in the US. The track that pushed The Joshua Tree into all-time classic territory, and a live centerpiece that made even their harshest critics admit they were operating on a different level. With or Without You didn't argue with anyone. It just played, and suddenly there wasn't much left to say against them. Number 5, Money for Nothing, Dire Straits. By the mid-80s, Dire Straits were labeled boring, polite pub rock in a world chasing neon pop and synth hooks. Critics said they were out of touch, too old school for the MTV generation. Then came Money for Nothing. Mark Knopfler built that iconic riff on a borrowed Les Paul and a borrowed idea, writing from the perspective of a cynical appliance store worker watching MTV, sneering at rock stars who get their money for nothing and their chicks for free. He got the idea after overhearing real delivery guys in a New York appliance store complaining about videos on the TVs. Ironically, the satire became one of the most famous songs on MTV. Look at them yo-yos, that's the way you do it. The video's blocky computer animation was groundbreaking for 1985, and the song's opening line, "I want my MTV," sung by Sting, became a cultural catchphrase and even part of MTV's own promos. It hit #1 in the US, won the Grammy for Best Rock Performance, and its video swept MTV's awards for Record of the Year. It turned Dire Straits from dad music into the sleek face of 80s rock for a moment. Critics could still call it dad rock. Knopfler just called it Tuesday, and the guitars spoke louder than reviews ever could. Oh, that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Let me tell you, damn guys. Number 4, No Rain, Blind Melon. In the early 90s, anything that wasn't heavy, dark, or drenched in distortion risked being written off as No Rain arrived with jangly guitars, a sunny groove, and Shannon Hoon's high, unpolished voice, and some critics weren't sure what to do with it. Then the B-Girl appeared. The now iconic video of a little girl in a bee costume, laughed at by everyone until she finds her own tribe, gave the song a face and a story. MTV played it constantly, and suddenly that gentle bounce sounded less naive and more like quiet resilience. Beneath the melody, Hoon was singing about numbness, boredom, and not fitting in. The same themes as grunge, just wrapped in light instead of noise. Single became a worldwide hit, But after Hoon's death in 1995, Blind Melon's story turned tragic. Looking back, people heard No Rain differently. Not as cute or quirky, but as a snapshot of fragile joy from a band that wouldn't get many tomorrows. It turned out you didn't need feedback and flannel to be authentic. Just the courage to admit you were lonely, even in the sunshine. Number 3. Sweet Child of Mine, Guns N' Roses. When Guns N' Roses broke out of Los Angeles in the late 80s, they were branded too wild to last. Critics saw chaos, drugs, and ego, not art, and plenty of people assumed they'd burn out before their first real hit. Then Slash picked up his guitar during rehearsal and played a goofy little pattern he was messing around with at home. A climbing figure he thought was just him fooling around, not the start of a hit song. That accidental riff became Sweet Child of Mine. A love song that didn't sound like a love song. Raw, vulnerable, and electric. Axl Rose's lyrics were written for Erin Everly, his then-girlfriend, but they read like a rock ballad for eternity. Sentimental without losing the band's edge. Even inside the band, not everyone believed in it at first. Slash has admitted he wasn't a fan of turning that warm-up into a full song. When Appetite for Destruction dropped in 1987, many reviewers wrote it off as reckless noise from another Sunset Strip metal band. A year later, Sweet Child of Mine hit #1 on Billboard, dragged the album to the top of the charts, and helped it become one of the best-selling rock records ever. Suddenly, the same critics who doubted them were calling it a modern hard rock masterpiece. Slash himself later said, "It was just us being us. That was enough." Sometimes the most chaotic bands make the most human songs, and that's exactly the kind of song that shuts the world up. Number 2. Livin' on a Prayer, Bon Jovi. Before Livin' on a Prayer, Bon Jovi were often lumped in with the rest of hair metal. Flashy, fun, and, in many critics' eyes, disposable. Then John Bon Jovi, Richie Sambora, and songwriter Desmond Child sat down and wrote about two ordinary people. Tommy and Gina, working-class lovers trying to hang on when the bills are overdue and the future looks thin. Tommy used to work on the docks. Union's been on strike. The talk box riff, the huge pre-chorus, the key change near the end, it all felt larger than life. But the story stayed grounded. Released in 1986, it hit #1 on Billboard and quickly outgrew the hair metal label, becoming one of the most enduring rock anthems of all time. Decades later, it's still shouted in bars, weddings, and stadiums by people who might not own a single Bon Jovi album. For a song some critics once treated as escapism, it has a remarkable way of making real struggle feel seen and shared. Proof that sometimes the most powerful thing you can sing is, "We've got each other," and that's a lot. Number 1, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, Pink Floyd. By the late 70s, some reviewers had grown tired of Pink Floyd's elaborate concepts. After Animals, they were accused of drifting into cold, bloated prog. Too much idea, not enough feeling. Roger Waters' answer was The Wall. A brutal, personal look at trauma, fame, and emotional isolation that was anything but distant. Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 was the shockwave at its center. The band took a disco-leaning beat, layered their signature guitars and atmospheres over it, and then brought in a children's choir to sing, "We Don't Need No Education." The single went to #1 in more than 10 countries, and schools and governments debated whether it was an attack on teachers, authority, or the whole system. In some places, it was even banned, which only made it more powerful. The same critics who had called Floyd remote now praise them for tapping into real anger and alienation. It wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural event, the rare song that could live on radio, in protest marches, and in art house discussions all at once.
We don't need no education.
For a band many thought had nothing left to prove, it was the loudest "we're still here" they could possibly have delivered. Critics move on, but these songs don't. These artists didn't argue back, they did what they do best and made something unforgettable. Sometimes it only takes one album, one riff, one chorus to flip the whole story, and when that happens, the reviews fade. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, subscribe for more stories behind the sound, and tell me in the comments which comeback song hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.